Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Dr. Lerone A. Martin. I am the Martin Luther King Jr. Centennial Professor and the Faculty Director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute here at Stanford University. And before I even get started with the event, as you would imagine, events like this take so much time and effort to create and to make happen. And so before we get started, I want to make sure I thank a couple people. Sean Klein of the Basic Income Lab for leadership of this event and bringing us all together. Linda Fagan of the Philosophy Department and Pam Goodman at the Center for Ethics and Society for all of your help in the logistics. Are you all here? Would you please stand so we can just thank you all? Your support is so appreciated. So on behalf of the MLK Institute here at Stanford and the Stanford Basic Income Lab and the Department of Philosophy and the Center for Ethics and Society, welcome to our event today, commemorating 60 years of the Martin Luther King Jr.'s campaign in Birmingham, Alabama for racial and economic justice. 60 years ago in Birmingham, when King was there campaigning for racial and economic justice, many of you may know that he was put in prison. While he was there in prison, he began writing the famous letter from Birmingham jail. And that letter called us all to fulfill the America's promise of democracy and opportunity for all. And so we thought there would be no better time to do that and no better place than here at Stanford University. Because as King continued his fight for justice and equality, in 1967, he came here to Stanford at the invitation of Stanford students. And he talked about the promise of a universal basic income program in the United States to help alleviate poverty. And in 1967, the Stanford student body, which looked significantly different than today, all stood up and gave him a round of applause. And so we thought with the King Institute here at Stanford, where we are editing and publishing King's papers, and the Stanford Basic Income Lab, which was established here in 2017, that there would be no better place to bring these ideas together with the King Institute and the Stanford Basic Income Lab. Now, a little bit about these two institutions here at Stanford. The MLK Institute was established in 1985 with Coretta Scott King giving King's papers here and licensing Stanford and commissioning Stanford to edit and publish them. And because of that, what we do is we promote and preserve King's legacy and his work through the research project of the King Papers Project and by events such as these and through education. We are currently teaching a class right now on ML King through Stanford Digital Education to high school students in Camden, New Jersey. And they're getting Stanford credit for that course. So that's part of what the MLK Institute does here at Stanford. In 2017, the Stanford Basic Income Lab was established to convene stakeholders around the politics, philosophy, economics, and implementation of basic income programs and related cash policies. It harvests learning from policymakers and practitioners who are implementing basic income pilot programs in their communities. And it equips the field with insights on these pilot programs for the growth and evolution of basic income experiments, pilots, and demonstrations. The Basic Income Lab hosts the most definitive map on income experiments in the United States, which you can find at Stanford's website on Basic Income Lab. And because of that, we have with us two individuals who are piloting this program in the country right now who will be with us today. I'm going to introduce both of them, and then after that, I'll introduce our moderator, and then they'll come up. Mayor Siddiqui of Cambridge is currently serving her third term on the Cambridge City Council and second as mayor of Cambridge. As mayor, her priorities include increasing affordable housing, supporting local businesses, improving Cambridge public schools, and leading Cambridge through the COVID-19 pandemic. And in response to that, Mayor Siddiqui created the Cambridge Rise, one of the first guaranteed income pilot programs in the country, which is featured on the Basic Income Lab's Guaranteed Income Pilots dashboard. Our second guest with us, relevant especially because of basic income, but also because of connection to Birmingham. Mayor Woodfin is entering his second term as Birmingham's 30th mayor on November 23rd, 2021. His philosophy of putting people first has guided his leadership and revitalization of the city's 99 neighborhoods, which is his top priority. Specifically, he is focused on enhancing education for young people, fostering economic opportunity for all residents, which included his vision for a new education and career opportunity center for students, which is called the Birmingham Promise, which is a public-private partnership that provides apprenticeships and tuition assistance to cover college costs for Birmingham high school graduates. Mayor Woodfin also launched Embrace Mothers, which is Birmingham's guaranteed income pilot program in 2022. It is also featured on the Basic Income Lab's Guaranteed Income Pilot dashboard here at Stanford. And our wonderful moderator, Juliana Bendidandicher, which I just butchered, is an assistant professor of philosophy and by courtesy of political science at Stanford University. She's the faculty director of the Stanford Basic Income Lab, which she founded in 2017. She mostly writes on the social and political value of equality. She has recently written a book called Justice Across Ages on the topic of inequalities and between age groups. So with no further ado, please join me in welcoming our three guests here to the front for our conversation this evening.
It's a wonderful, wonderful pleasure to be here with everyone. This is the first in-person event of the Basic Income Lab since March 2020, a very unfortunate timing of our last event. And I just spent a few minutes trying to train everyone to say my name right, but it didn't work out. So I'm going to say my name. Juliana Bendidandicher. So I'm an assistant professor in philosophy, as Lauren just mentioned, and the faculty director of the Basic Income Lab. So today we are extremely lucky to have the mayor of Cambridge and the mayor of Birmingham with us. They are both part of Mayors for Guaranteed Income, which is a coalition of mayors throughout the country who have committed in one way or another to building a robust income floor for their constituents and who want to push the envelope by experimenting bold solutions against economic injustices. Many of these mayors are experimenting guaranteed income, including Mayor Siddiqui and Mayor Woodfin. And so the aim of tonight is really to ask them questions about those pilots, to try and get a sense of what motivated them to launch those demonstrations, and also to ask them what they think is the way forward. Or as MLK Jr. asked in Chaos of Community, where do we go from here? So maybe before asking my first question, I wanted to spend a minute just defining what guaranteed income is. As you can imagine, not everyone will define it in the same way or even agree on the definitional features of the policy, but it's helpful to start with the definition nonetheless, and then we can take issue with it in the future if need be. So guaranteed income is a poverty eradication program that would ensure individuals, families never fall below a given threshold. And the program achieves that by providing a regular cash grant to those who need it. So it's a means-tested cash program, but the eligibility threshold can vary. It can be very inclusive. It is, however, unrestricted. Individuals who get the cash can decide to do what they want with it, as opposed to, say, housing vouchers or food vouchers will restrict the use of the fund to a particular purpose. And it is unconditional also, in the sense that it is not conditioned on employment, and it departs from many existing programs in that respect. Okay, so I hope that definition, this is, at least there's agreement in my panel here on the definition, roughly. Okay, so my first question to you both is really a more personal one to start with. Many of us interested in guaranteed income programs are so for reasons that connect to their lived experiences. And so I wanted to ask you first if you could tell us a little bit about what led you to believe that people should be guaranteed cash, no questions asked, and no strings attached. And maybe, sorry, I should say we should stop. So Mayor Siddiqui, you can stop, and then Mayor Woodfin.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with Mayor Woodfin and be at Stanford. So I want to thank everyone who organized this event. Any day where we get to talk about this topic is such a great day. So thank you again for having me here. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Cambridge. It's my hometown. I was born in Pakistan. And we came here with my parents and my twin brother for this American dream. And as we know, with the American dream, it can look different for a lot of people. For my parents, they got here and none of their degrees really translated over. And so they immediately found work. My mom eventually became a cashier at a local supermarket. My dad found multiple jobs. They're actually in their 70s and they're still working. And they're such hard workers. And I remember growing up and thinking, seeing them just constantly work to pay the bills, struggle to really make ends meet. We were lucky because we were in a place like Cambridge. We did have access to affordable housing. So I grew up in Cambridge affordable housing. We had access to various resources, Head Start, different forms of public assistance, you name it. We had all that, and still there was so much struggle. And now as mayor, I think one of my main priorities has become, to address the issues of poverty. And I see the struggle that my parents have directly in the constituents who come to my office, who have trouble paying for food, childcare, you name it. Just living is so expensive if you are in poverty. And so when I think about what really led me to guaranteed income, I really feel that it is an effective tool. It really says that the government says, we see you, we recognize you need assistance, and we trust you to really make those decisions. I think so many of the issues that are part of this system, and I saw it with what my family went through and what my constituents go through, we make it really hard. We make it really, really hard. And so guaranteed income for me has been a really powerful tool. And I think my lived experience really led me to be focusing on it as mayor.
I'm honored to be here at Stanford, and I want to say thank you to both for this invite and appreciate the time to be here, to be with you as well, Mayor. My lived experience is based twofold, but it's centered around family. One inside my home and the other extended family. I grew up in a household that were never less than 8 people. So listening to that, sometimes that meant more than 8 people, minimum of 4 generations. And within that, I saw a little bit of everything. I saw the not one, but several uncles released from prison, didn't have anywhere to go, so they came to live with their sister, my mom. I saw the auntie who was strung out on drugs, and cousins came to live with us. So we always had extended family living in my home, seeing poverty up close from aunts and uncles and my cousins who had a stint in their life living in our household. So having a front row seat to poverty at such an early age as a child, but not from strangers, but family, showed me a lot what's happening for people who are struggling. Outside of my home, my mother is one of 8 children. My dad is one of 6. And so pretty much all my extended family, including my grandmother, stayed in public housing. So again, visiting family members from various public housing sites across the city of Birmingham, which is home for me, born and raised. I got a chance again to see poverty up close in front, outside of my own home, and all of these neighborhoods that my family lived in. And then fast forward to 20 years ago, which was 2003, right out of college. I worked for an organization called the Jefferson County Committee of Economic Opportunity, JCCEO. And the whole notion was to kickstart programs anywhere from early childhood to workforce training, workforce development, to enhance opportunity for people to be employed, gainfully employed. And so that working experience 20 years ago, fresh out of college, taught me that you have to be intentional about providing opportunity. So fast forward into being mayor, a guaranteed income just makes sense to me based on all my lived experiences, including my first working experience.
Thank you so much to both of you. So now I guess I have a question about your cities very specifically, and I think there's something about your mic that needs to be fixed. So we know that there are cities throughout the country experimenting with guaranteed income, and so there is a common vision behind those experimentations. But there are also important differences between the cities and the kinds of challenges that each cities face. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your cities, Cambridge and Birmingham, and how guaranteed income connects with some of the specific challenges your cities face. And maybe on the more positive side, if you could tell us also about the opportunities specific to your cities that led you to think guaranteed income would be a promising program. And maybe we'll start with Mayor Woodfin.
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Is my mic better this time? Yeah. Thank you. My friends back here supporting me. Yeah, so Birmingham, Alabama is it's in the center of the state of Alabama. Pretty much smack dab in the middle of the entire Southeast, by train, by plane, and by interstate. It is a city made up of 200,000 people, 23 communities, 99 neighborhoods. But unfortunately, within our city, it's not just poverty, it's concentrated poverty at a staggering rate well above 23%. And it's the fourth blackest city in America. So after Detroit, Flint, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama. Some very unique challenges, but I believe also some very unique opportunities. I think one of the drivers, again, for engaging in this Mayors for Guaranteed Income pilot program is to find a way to be very, very intentional about decreasing poverty. Now, on the long-term end, Professor mentioned the program we created called Birmingham Promise. It is a long-term play designed for the next generation, that they can enter any state tuition, they can enter any state 2-year, 4-year college, university, and do it tuition-free. So they don't have to worry about being burdened with any debt. If the college university accepts them, their tuition's covered. No GPA requirement, no SAT, ACT requirement. But those same young people while in high school can leave high school early, receive high school credit hours for working, work a minimum of 15 hours a week and be paid a livable wage of $15 an hour. Again, doing whatever they want with that money as high school students, so assist and help with their family, which we know they already do. So that's a long-term play on the investing in education, investing in the next generation on how to alleviate poverty. What we find for these children's mothers, and so in Birmingham, 63% of households are led by single women. That's a staggering number. And from that, I think it's important we do everything we can to support and invest in our single mothers who lead their households. It turns out that the average income for majority of these households, median income is $12,300. I think slang, we would call that chump change, right? That's nothing to be able to take care of a family with a minimum of 3 children. So for us, again, on the positive end, we believe a guaranteed income pilot program to see over a year's time what single mothers do with this money, how they provide for, invest in, and protect their families. We think has had a major impact that we're still collecting the results and information and data.
Yeah, I have a similar statistic that I'll share with some of our families in poverty in Cambridge. Cambridge is 120,000 and 6.6 miles. And when people think of Cambridge, they think of Harvard, MIT, they think of innovation. They think of Palo Alto, right? They think about the biotech and the industry. And that industry has gotten, us to be we have a AAA bond rating. We have a lot of wealth. We do. And it's helped us do a lot of great things and provide resources for our residents. But we also have this concentrated poverty. Based on some recent reports, 1 out of 8 residents is food insecure. The families who are at the bottom 20%, about 24,000 families, their average median income is $13,000. And you look at who's making the most, that average is $350,000. So you think about that wealth, that gap. We're a small city, it's 13 neighborhoods. And so I think that's the challenge, right? We know who these people are. So that is also an opportunity. And I think about the Cambridge ecosystem with nonprofits, our institutions, our government. We've been able to come together and do this pilot. And so that was really the opportunity. It was not, let's see if we can do this. It was, okay, let's do it, and let's come up with a pilot. And we focused on single caretakers as well. And so I think we've been able to address some of it, but there's so much work to be done.
Thank you so much for your answers. I guess the next question has to be about the pilots. And for that question, I'd like you to start, Mayor Siddiqui, because we're going to go in chronological order, and your pilot is older than the Birmingham pilot. So I guess if you could talk us through the process that led to this pilot being implemented, and maybe some of the specifics of the pilot, who's getting cash and how much and for how long. And then Mayor Woodfin, I want to ask you the same question about your more recent pilot.
So I became mayor January 2020, and 30 pounds later. It was January 2020, and who knew? And so COVID hit, and at that time I launched the Mayor's Disaster Relief Fund. And so that fund raised over $5 million in a really short period of time from the industry that I've referenced. And that went directly to individuals. That was direct cash assistance to individuals. And a lot of folks reached out and said, this was such a lifeline to me at a really critical period. And is there more? Can there be more? And at that time, it was June 2020. So I learned about Mayor Tubbs' work with Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And I decided to join. They were actively recruiting mayors. And so I joined in October 2020. And I think I had seen our disaster relief fund just be so successful. And here, I thought it was fraud at first. I was like, what? $500,000? And what? I really couldn't believe that there was something like this, that it was really, the moment was so important. And so I quickly assembled key stakeholders in the community. I got our Cambridge Community Foundation with us. I got our anti-poverty agency together. I got our Cambridge Housing Authority. And we basically had a working group that started really December 2020. And we worked on the details, the who, the what, the why. We focused on single caretakers because of the data that we had. We did a $500 a month, and we wanted to do an 18-month pilot. So that started September 2021. But it took a significant time to just plan. And that first disbursement went out, and the last disbursement just went out February 2023. So it just ended. And we, I guess even prior to that, we had decided with our American Rescue Plan money, this is last April, we decided to use $22 million of it to expand. And so we're actually expanding the pilot. And that will launch, knocking on any wood. It's been a year planning this expansion. That's going to launch in hopefully in June. And so we didn't really need to see the data, right? Through anecdotes, through storytelling, we saw how effective it was for those 130 single caretakers. And the Center for Guaranteed Income is providing the follow-up report for the specifics around that pilot. So those are some details in the process.
It's pretty good. Can I borrow some of that 22 million? Thank you.
Sure.
All right. We definitely had a long process of researching and the figuring out our way of how to roll this out. So that took a significant amount of time. I do want to publicly acknowledge Michael Tubbs. Him and I served together back in a cohort of mayors in 17, 18, 19, and 20 as well. So I know was extremely passionate about this. And so I told him I would be here today, and told him I would send him a shout out. But we also talked about a whole lot of other things, including his relationships on going out here and being able to raise that type of seed funding, and then getting out here various cities across the country to pick why was Birmingham picked. Of course, he went into a short story outside of our relationship. But fast forwarding to our local team, which was led by two ladies, Amelia Muller, as well as Sarah McMillan. They led on the ground. I don't take the credit for them getting in the weeds and trees of the day-to-day of how was this going to be built, how is it going to be rolled out, executed, etc. We also had to have a fiscal agent outside of the city council approving this. So the city council had to approve to receive the funds, because they came from outside of the city, of $500,000 for us to receive. Passed unanimously, of course. And then we had to have a fiscal agent, a local fiscal agent by the name of the East Lake Initiative, who served as the fiduciary partner in the executing of the funds instead of the city of Birmingham allocating the funds. In addition to that, we were intentional about making sure the city did not pick who the recipients were going to be. So we had a different party, our research partner, do that part. They chose 110 single women, head of their households across the city, at a random selection. We entitled the program called Embrace Mothers. Each of these 110 mothers received $375 unrestricted over a 12-month period. And I do want to pull up my phone, because I showed the mayor this earlier. It's right here. The average age of these single mothers is 34. I told you earlier their median household income, but I want to give you all, as of March 31st, 2023, their top 10 spends. Number one is Walmart. 2, Alabama Power, it's a utility company. 3, Shell's gas station. 4, Amazon. 5, Family Dollar. 6, Chevron gas station. 7, Publix. 8, Dollar General. 9, Sam's Club. 10, McDonald's. I could be wrong, but of those 10, it's only 3 categories. That's utility, that's gas, and food. And so, there's a stigma around guaranteed income based on some intentional code words and political language. But these women, single family women of their households, leading their households, seeing that they were doing the basic things to take care of their family. Food on the table, lights on, getting from point A to B to take their children or where they needed to be. And so for me, watching this over the last year, I don't think I would have been able to say this 12 months ago. But today I can look you, this audience, and square in your eyes and tell you that guaranteed income is not about giving out money. It is about securing a basic standard of living. And that is the power of this pilot program.
Thank you so much. So there is this very strong commitment throughout this movement led by mayors to the thought that no one deserves to live in poverty. And your pilots really focus on mothers. And I really invite everyone to also look at the really interesting work being done throughout the country, which I see as really everywhere affirming this notion that everyone deserves to live a life free from poverty. And some of them focus on artists, some of them focus on formerly incarcerated individuals, some of them focus on young adults exiting the foster care system, some of them focus on expecting mothers. So when we had this event with mayors from throughout the country, it was in 2017, so it was at the beginning of Stockton, and we were lucky to have, of course, Mayor Tubbs with us, but also mayors from all around the country. Some of them went on to experiment, some of them didn't, but we were having a conversation on this moment, this important realization that cities could really be laboratories of change. And so we didn't really have to wait until federal level, the state levels was ready to experiment with those very bold measures. So one thing that the Stockton team shared at the time was some of the barriers they faced when they started talking about this idea, and some of the entrenched stereotypes about people in poverty that made it very difficult to convince their constituents sometimes, and a variety of stakeholders to support them. And of course, we learned a lot from those barriers because they arise throughout the country. And so in experimenting, it's not just about the data, it's also about understanding better the pushback and finding creative ways to overcome that. So I wonder if you could share some things about the barriers you faced when you went forward with your program, and some of the learnings in hopefully overcoming those barriers. Maybe we can start with you, Mayor Woodfin.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say I think the barriers are multifold. I wouldn't say there's one barrier. The barrier is a unique word to use because I feel like if it is a barrier, we found a way to get over it or go around it or through it. In our situation, I told you all that there was 110 mothers who participated in our program. What I did not tell you was that 7,000 applicants. There were 7,000 completed applications for 110 slots. That does not count the total of 18,000 people who started an application who didn't finish. So 18,000 people started an application, 7,000 finished for 110 slots. So the first barrier was just the overwhelming need, desire, and not being in a position to feel the need and desire with $500,000 divided by $375 for 110 slots, where the demand was as big as this campus. I think another barrier was the political hurdle of receiving the money. So the state of Alabama has this whole notion of dollars cannot be used for personal gain, whether they are tax dollars or you receive them from a third party. You can't just give it to an individual because that's the definition per state law of personal gain, whatever that means. So finding a third party partner to be in a position for the council to approve on one hand, to then have an organization to receive the funding on the other hand to disperse the funds. A partner that was, I guess, had the capacity, fidelity, as well as intentionality to see this through. So that was not necessarily easy. That took a while. And then another hurdle, again, this perception, everybody. Turns out that since 1969, the mayor and I were talking about this, that this got real close. This is not the first pilot program. Back in 1969, Mayor, I believe, Richard Nixon got extremely close. He engaged the Senate, he engaged the House of Representatives, and then one of his advisors came to him and told him about this program in another country a century before, as well as some code words and language around laziness, and how this would turn into, not necessarily 69, but definitely in the 70s, the whole notion in terms of welfare queens, etc. So through some intentional negative political language, it got beat up. And it got beat up over time and over years. So fast forward to 2021, when you say you want to, quote, have a pilot program like this, people think you're just giving out money. They don't see it as a floor for basic standard of living. They don't use those type of terms. They don't use the type of terms of alleviating poverty. They think it creates laziness. They think people will quit their jobs. Turns out none of that's true, everybody. It wasn't true in 1969 when they piloted this in I don't know how many cities, where I think at least 16 economists agreed to it, et cetera, nationwide. It definitely did not, nobody quit their job in 2022 or 2023 in Birmingham either. Mayor, I would say anybody in your program didn't quit their job either. So that was another barrier, just getting over the perception or the negative connotation centered around basic income. I could go on and on, I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, and just to add to what the mayor said, you think about the stimulus checks, you think about the child care tax credit.
Tell them again, Mayor.
Right, that's all a guaranteed income, right? It's all guaranteed income, and so the perception is a big part of, we have to, it's there, and the narrative is there, but I think people just listen to what they want to listen to. I think in Cambridge, very similar barriers. I think what I'll add is benefit mitigation was a big, we were up to task for that. We had, I think each pilot has to advocate to get barriers from, whether it was SNAP, a lot of local agencies, the housing authority. So literally, I spent a lot of time working with state officials asking for benefit waivers, because one of the questions we got was, well, my rent's going to go up, with $500 monthly for 18 months, and I can't have my rent go up. And it's the same thing with the system. As soon as you get a new job, as soon as you get some income, people ask you you have to move now. You don't qualify for the housing anymore. You don't. So a lot of that work was challenging. It's become slightly easier for this expansion, but I think that's where you have to have good state and federal partners who are saying, look, we believe in this concept, and we have bigger cities like Chicago and LA who have been able to convince HUD and SSI to help lead the way. But that was it's one of the barriers.
I just want to, if you don't mind, just putting a fine point on what the mayor said about, like, we've been here before. Does anybody, by a show of hand, know anybody that received not one, not two, but 3 stimulus checks? Right? The government did that several times. That is what it is, but don't let nobody tell you it's something else. That by stimulating the economy, guaranteed income does the same thing. I just listed to you all the top 10 businesses that receive that money. The money goes right back into the economy. So I don't think, this is a capitalistic society. And I support capitalism. I want to be very clear about that. But I also believe this country has a history of stimulus, any synonym you want to use for it, to stimulate the economy. That's what this does too. When you give people a basic standard of living, The money is literally going back into stimulating America's economy, period.
Millions of millions of people.
So I'm hearing a lot of really interesting insights already, and one of them really is about the limitations of pilots. Eventually we are in this phase of piloting and experimenting everywhere, and I think, again, that stems out of this realization that we just can't wait for things to happen necessarily at the federal or state level, and that cities can really show the way, decide to invest in communities in really innovative ways, and show the way. But pilots are always going to be very limited. And what you're sharing, the story you're sharing, is the story throughout the country of thousands of people applying and only few getting cash. So if that's not a demonstration of the great need, and then I don't know what is. And I'm also hearing, the issue around really thinking really carefully about the package of benefits, and not just thinking about the cash in isolation. And I think all the pilots are learning that firsthand by having to negotiate waivers so that people don't end up worse off than they were. The aim is really to build a robust floor, not to replace one thing with another and leave people where they are. So in thinking about scaling up, those questions have to remain front and center in thinking about redesigning those safety nets. And in terms of the perceptions, I think we are also learning a lot about, as you said, those are barriers, but they can be overcome. And there's a great many people who also need it and can become advocates for it as well. And I think this is something you mentioned, the previous experiments, and in the same vein, Canada had this experiment out also in the 70s in Manitoba. And one of the findings of their experiment was that people tended to view cash very moralistically before it started. And by the end of it, they started seeing it pragmatically as a stepping stone. So yeah, we are learning so much, and we're very grateful for that. So I guess my next question, and I want to make sure I leave some time for the Q&A afterwards, so we're gonna have to be quick with my last couple of questions. But I guess for you, Mayor Woodfin, first. So I wonder if you could say something about ways in which your pilots and your vision connect with MLK's vision, because that's really what brought us together today. How strong has the King legacy been, both in your own commitment to guaranteed income, but also in communicating the promise of the program to your constituents?
So I think, there is a poster child in America for the Poor People's Campaign. In 2023, I think Birmingham, Alabama is a place where it's small enough for you to try something different, but large enough if it works for you to scale it up. And I think from that standpoint, we often talk about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois from the standpoint of the economic identity for Black Americans. And then we talk about King and Malcolm from an identity and political standpoint. But I think people forget in King's later years, and I'm defining later as post the march in DC, talking about 64, 65, and particularly 66, 67, 68. A lot of it, especially if you read his last book, fully centered around the economic plight for Black Americans, and actually for all Americans, right? For poor people, for poor Americans. It extended itself beyond race. I think these guaranteed pilot programs fit King's definition, right? That post being assassinated in 68 and 69, we got this close to, at the federal level, $1,600 being offered. Fast forward today, 60 years later, We've just completed a program over 1 year for $375 a month. And so I think all of our pilot programs are reflective of what King talked about. I think it's time to scale up.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think when I think about Cambridge Rise, recurring income for success and empowerment, it's very, very much connected to this legacy that we talk about when we talk about Dr. King. I also want to acknowledge all the Black women who were involved in shaping Dr. King. It was Johnny Tillman, National Welfare Rights Organization, all the work that women did, right, talking about guaranteed income. These women were discriminated against daily, but they still fought and talked about it. And, they met with Dr. King, and I think you'll see how he's impacted by his work, by their work, and then being able to talk about this concept and this idea that really isn't new. It's not, no ideas are really new, right? But we need a transformational leader like Dr. King to be shaping hearts and minds. And I think he taught us you have to be transformative in the way you govern. And I think that's what these pilots do.
Thank you so much. And actually a follow-up question on this for you, Mayor Siddiqui. If you could talk about ways in which you see your pilot really articulating or connecting with both racial justice and gender justice. And you've said some things that speak to that already, but if there's anything more you want to say about that.
Yeah, I'll share some anecdotes. I've gotten to know some of the recipients, and they'll usually find me at an event because, we don't know who got, when the lottery ran, it's not like we were choosing, right? Of course, it's a really good layer there, but, they'll come to me at an event and say, Mayor Siddiqui, I'm a recipient of Cambridge Rise. Thank you. This one woman, she's a Black woman with a daughter, she said to me, Mayor Siddiqui, I think this is like the first time I feel kind of respected by the government, that I feel seen by the government. And here's what I'm doing with the money. And, she said, I've paid for a babysitter and I've now been able to take night classes and I'm getting my certificate to be a medical assistant, right? And, there's other single caretakers who I've spoken to, they're paying back debt, right? They're able to take their family on the first vacation ever, right? Growing up poor, I don't think I didn't go on vacation, right? And so that just simple concept of living life, right? And making sure that the government is not disrespecting you. The reality is our systems are built, are racist systems. They make you feel undignified, right? And I think when I think about these concepts, I see it in these individuals who, are really, they're improving their economic mobility, right? They're not quitting jobs, right? They're not these tropes that exist. It's the exact opposite. So I think of the women and their stories, and I see the intersection between race and gender. And I also, want to lift up that when we look at how our system has, really impacted women who, we really burden women, whether that's, how expensive childcare is, right? It just, the list goes on how hard we make it to be a woman. And whatever the government can do to make it a little bit easier to be able to respect women is really important.
Thank you so much. I have a really difficult question for the end, which is the where do we go from here question. Pilots, will end. There's the immediate question of that worries, I know, a lot of you and a lot of the experimenters, which is what happens to those who are left behind, either those who never made it through the program or those who got an injection of cash for a year and now that has to end. but also the longer term question of how do we ensure that this is not a fleeting moment, and that concrete steps are taken so that safety nets are rebuilt in a very robust way, especially in light of all the challenges that we are facing. So that's a hard question, given the political context in this country. But if we could get some of your insights on what the way forward looks like. Maybe Woodfin, do you want to start?
I can start us off. I will say that I think there's a historical line, there's some history here from the founding fathers to Thomas Paine to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Richard Nixon to Michael Tubbs and you, that there's been some intentional conversation about this for quite some time. And so in all those names and characters I just mentioned, this topic on its face is super nonpartisan. It's unfortunate that in actual public space and conversation, it's been made partisan, but everybody I just named, that's both sides of the aisle. And so I think it's going to take some political courage. I will actually be in DC tomorrow by 9 a.m. And tomorrow night, many mayors will convene and come together over a dinner for Mayors for Guaranteed Income, where the conversation will be centered around not just what we've been able to do, but next steps. We believe part of the next steps will be taking all of this data through the Mayors for Guaranteed Income, and then finding a way to share that data with all the mayors associations across the nation, with our delegations and our states. That includes our House of Representatives members as well as our U.S. senators. We believe there's an ear in the White House, but there's also a simple way to do this, y'all. The mayor and I talked about this, and she can wax on better than I can on the child income tax credit, that you can take something that exists and just turn it into something, call it something different, but the process already exists. A name already exists, and you can turn it into something else because you already have a platform where families are receiving this right now.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I'll say just that, meeting with the federal delegation, I was in DC a few weeks ago, and we went to my rep, the amazing Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and also Congressman Jim McGovern, and just talking to people and our representatives about what this looks like and sharing the stories, sharing the data. There's a lot of data out there. We have the data. It works. And so it's really about getting those in power to be more, powerful advocates. And I'll say, at the really granular level, I've said to people, run for office. It really matters who is in office. It really matters that we have people with lived experience working on policy. And I think that can truly make a difference. And so I've been just really encouraging whoever I meet who expresses any little interest. I'm like, I think it's really important to have as many advocates with lived experience making the actual policy. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think in Cambridge, we're really excited to be doing a $22 million expansion that will benefit over 2,000 families. But then what comes after 18 months, right? I think I'm really hopeful in the next 18 months, 2-3 years, we'll see even more momentum, and we'll have a childcare tax credit, right? That'll be huge.
And I like that you both noted that there is already a lot of data out there. It's very important. This wave of data will be really interesting. And I think especially with this particular wave of experiments, There's going to be a broader range of questions asked than just the labor effect and the spending question that are always asked and for which we have a lot of data already. So it's going to be interesting. But I agree with you, there's so much data, and there's also for sure a lot of data on what poverty does to individuals and communities. There's no question there that we know. There's also a lot of data on how much poverty costs, even in financial terms, and that can already inform the conversation on how much a universal basic income or guaranteed income would actually cost when you factor that in, the long-term cost of poverty. So just a very last question now, if we try to move away from the data a little bit and think about the values that really underpin that commitment. People appeal to all sorts of values in justifying or making the case for basic income. I would say, some people appeal to freedom, some people appeal to equality. Just to end, before we open up to the question of the audience, if you were to pick one value, and that's hard, for you that really aligns with the proposal, what would it be?
Yeah, go first, Mayor.
No, you go first. We're stumped. Dignity. I think we need to trust. We need to trust people. I think so much of that perception, just the racist tropes that exist, I think, we have to change that. We have to really work actively, really intentionally to change the narrative. And that takes all of us. It takes talking about guaranteed income and actually telling the story of how people are using the money and what they're doing, and giving them the dignity to decide what they should do with it.
I don't have one word for you, sorry. But I think that there's been an overwhelming amount of economic injustice that's been intentional at the federal, state, and local level throughout our country, 400 plus years. I think you have to be intentional about economic justice. And I think it has bless you. I think it has a moral bent towards getting this right. Again, this is not about giving out money. Do we want all Americans, regardless of race, creed, religion, do we want all Americans to have a basic standard of living? The answer is either yes or no. If it's yes, then we should do this. If it's no, that sounds pretty un-American.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm sure that there are questions. So if you may raise your hand, and there are a few mics, or maybe just, 2 mics in the room. So, and you can raise your hand and I'll know. Okay, Marco, next.
And thank you. I actually have a question about the course of the board. I think you mentioned that people had to apply to be able to win the lottery, and if I'm not mistaken, the empirical data says that the people who are the least educated and also the poorest normally don't know how to apply, or don't know that they have to apply, or even that the program exists. So how do you, is there any way to think about them in the system, or will they remain the forgotten? And on a similar vein, considering how much other sources of revenue city governments have, is there any other part of revenue that you will be willing to transform for whatever is being used at the moment to become part of this aid to the poor through guaranteed income?
Sure.
So the first part of that is, I think we really relied on the community partners who know these individuals to help them apply. So they weren't doing it alone. We had some specific rules with the Center for Guaranteed Income. You can print the applications, which was really a hassle. We did the nonprofits that were working with individuals who wanted to apply. You had to do it on your computer. So there's a lot of things that we are changing for our expansion, because to your point, there are a lot of people still really having a hard time going to someone in order to help them. The second part of this is similar to Alabama. We have something in Massachusetts called the Anti-Aid Amendment, and it's stupid, yeah. And the only way this pilot that we were able to use city money is to fund the Cambridge Rise project manager salary, which was we funded about $150,000, and then the rest we raised through philanthropy. And so, I think, and now we're using ARPA money for this expansion. And my hope is, because we have a new governor, and we will have some more flexibility around using our general fund. That's my goal, because we have a $800 million operating budget, not including the capital expenses that we have. So we have plenty of money, and I would love to be able to use it.
So it turns out for us that, everybody doesn't go to birminghamal.gov, our city website. And so you find every communication channel you can. Black radio, social media, churches, barbershops, beauty shops. I went to one neighborhood called North Birmingham. It's an actual neighborhood of one of the 99. And we were able to geofence and target the certain particular group we were looking for that included households led by women. So we knocked on doors. We went straight to the residents we wanted to participate. We leaf dropped, so some doors we did knock on, but the flyer was right there on their door. We put flyers in church, on cars in church parking lots. We hit every type of channel we could. The drop-off line at school, morning in, 3 o'clock. So you find every single way we could to get this information out. And we think by doing that, that's why we had so many people actually apply, because we over-communicated with our residents about this opportunity. On your second part of your question, if we can find a way to get around some of the state laws that gives us some local control, I feel empowered to use a whole lot of local resources to continue to expand this program well beyond a pilot.
One quick story. We kind of looked at different mailers, and we had one mailer that just said Cambridge Rise and some information, and we were like, people are going to just toss this out, right? So the team decided, we're going to put your face on it, because people will kind of look at it and maybe not think it's just a fraud. And I think that just like those really details of like, how are people going to pay attention and not just throw it out if they're getting something in the mail.
So this is, first, thank you. This is just enormously inspiring, all three of you. I have a question, which is that $500 a month, you said, in Cambridge, and $375 in Birmingham. Sounds like it's wonderful, but sounds like a little bit of money. And do you have, including Juliana, ideas? Are these people getting out of poverty with that much money? And how much does it cost? Something like it's a really big question. How much does it cost to get these, single women households out of poverty?
Let me be honest with you and say I don't know what that number is. Let me also respond. So that's responding to your question, responding to your statement that seems like a little money. The answer is yes. It's not a lot of money. You can do a whole lot of money with it when you do $375 times 12. Excuse me. When you do that times 12, do that once a month. It turns out when you have 3 children in a home and a lot of mouths to feed between food or paying a power bill, this program has literally kept lights on. It has literally kept food on the table.
I think it's fantastic. I'm interested in how to really end poverty, as you're all interested in doing, so thank you.
Oh, well, scale up. Go from a pilot program to actually, at a federal level, doing a guaranteed income that's probably attached to some floor. Now, what that floor is debatable, right? Because what a floor is in the South may be different from the East Coast or here in California. So I literally wouldn't know what that number would be.
To the start.
Correct.
I'll just add that some of the reason it was 500, the pilot was also how much money we raised, right? I think if we had waited longer, we probably could have increased that to $1,000 a month. I think we wanted to just get money to the hands of individuals. And I think another thing that came up from those we were getting benefit waivers from, I think at that time, 500 was more palpable than like 1,000. And so it was some of that calculation that went in because, again, the system is designed, right? They're like, well, this person, you're getting, over the year, you're getting X amount of money. This is increasing your income X amount. This is, there's a lot of people on the housing waiting list, right? That's the response. And so we had to really, there's that balance. But I think as the mayor said, I think if we're doing it more broadly, there's just much more you can do.
So that 1,600 back in 1969, I believe in 2000, somewhere between 2012, 2016, that would be, what, 10,000 a year? So.
And let me just add that I think the number that's floated around on the federal level, although there are many, many proposals at $1,000 a month, but as you said, in different places, it's $1,000 a month means very different things in different places. But I think what all those pilots are showing is how even a little bit means so much to all these families, which really shows how little it is that they have. And you had this number earlier about how much those individuals actually have. And I think the dilemmas that experimenters faced was, we could give 1,000, but that would be to half the number of families. And so this is MLK talked about this scarcity mentality, this scarcity mindset. And it's one that you're led to if you have a very tiny budget. So that's a very big problem. And I think I'm even more worried about the duration issue, the fact that it ends so quickly, because guaranteed income is meant to be a robust floor that lasts for much longer than that. So, but when you realize that those 500 are such a high proportion of people's income, if it's going to double people's income, then you realize it's not nothing at all. So there's one question here and then one in the front.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. My question has some context. So I'm a pediatrician and a researcher, and I'm also Canadian, which is important to explain because my question to you is we have seen lots of pilots like this at a lot of times around the world. We have seen the data that shows that it's helpful. Like there's no question now. And yet time and time again, you'll have a pilot, shows great data, a new government comes in and boom, it's gone. So my question to you is really, as people in politics, speaking to those of us who are in academia and professions, how can we work together to now make sure these pilots don't just get thrown out with political whim? Like, what are we doing wrong? Because we clearly have the data and it's not working. So what can we do to help you?
Well, I think the work you're doing is very helpful. So one, let me say thank you. Two, you definitely have the energy, which is needed. To be very honest with every single person in this room, there is political courage at the local level. But it turned out at the local level, we don't have local control. So the biggest thing we can do is treat this as a political campaign. Political campaigns require, at the root of them, organization. And the who we're organizing around is our legislative form of government at the federal level. And if that's too big, which possibly maybe that's not the best place to start, then you start at the state level. And we organize around our state legislators. Those in our state house of representatives and the state senate. To be clear, all of them are swimming in a lot of cash right now, to the point where they don't know what to do with the money. I think this would be a great place to infuse some cash that everybody's flowing in right now.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer to that because I'm also like, what Joe Manchin, what Kristen Sinema? I don't get it. Not to be so political, but I've been like, I've been really thinking about what is it going to take, and it is political courage. I think I think about some states who have publicly financed elections. Making it just easier from the bottom for people to participate, and I think I can see where a lot of the people who are in office at the local level and then they go to the state level, it's all the same people. We have such a big hill to climb to get more diversity and more lived experience, back to my original answer. So I'm going to keep pushing that, but you should run for office. Oh, you're Canadian. Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah, well, I'll add this quickly.
Yeah, sure. And then we have one last question, and then we have...
I study cities that I define as successful, and that definition is depending on moving the needle and improving the quality of life of the people that live in that city. Turns out a lot of the successful cities, they have something very similar, something in common, and that is genuine public-private partnerships. Maybe all of this doesn't have to be at the federal or state level. In the wake of George Floyd's killing, we saw it across the country where corporate America committed millions of dollars. I do not have the number, but it was a lot of money. I wouldn't be surprised if it reached a T. 3 years later, where's that money? Right? Where are these pledges and commitments? Maybe part of this is going back to corporate America at any local level, city or state, and saying, what does a public-private partnership look like, and a guaranteed floor for citizens in a particular area, county, city, and or state. And I guarantee you that will work as well. Just a thought.
We are out of time, but I think we have one question here.
Okay, I'll make this quick. I'm Jules, I'm a freshman. So I'm wondering, like in the wake of, for example, like COVID-19, and we saw this especially with the Trump administration, where people on a specific side of the aisle, and also some like more like center-leaning Democrats are guilty of this, but this idea of like socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. We saw this with like corporate bailouts during COVID-19. We saw this for tax cuts to the rich early in the Trump presidency. So I was wondering, why do you think this is, or why do you think there's so much pushback and resistance to even like pilots of universal basic income from not even like the people who subscribe to like these tropes due to like the media they consume, but people who know better? And what are some ways that we can subvert that, both as citizens and also as policymakers?
I'll try to be very brief and succinct by saying this. I think that is because certain people in political power use poor people as punching bags, even when they convince those same poor people this is not in your best interest.
No, that's well put.
So I just wanted to close by encouraging everyone on the QR code here is both the website for the MLK Institute, as well as the Stanford Basic Income Lab to learn more about these issues that were discussed today. And also King's speech, The Other America, where he also outlines the need for a basic income program here at Stanford University that is available online. The speech is called The Other America. So I just wanted to highlight that for those who are looking for more information And finally, probably the most full statement, as both mayors have mentioned tonight, of King's ideas about universal basic income are in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? So just wanted to mention that. So
Thank you, Sumbul. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.